University.
And so together we've really dedicated our work to leadership development, organization consulting, professional growth, particularly in higher education. And so we're going to discuss how leaders can focus on their values and that rooted leadership to do their best work. So today, this is a quick look at what we're going to do together in the next little time that we have together. First, we're going to explore, we're going to look at why clarity about personal values is foundational to effective leadership and sound decision making. And then we're going to reflect and ground. We want to look at two key frameworks that help anchor our understanding of how values and identity shape the way we lead. And finally, we're going to identify and connect. You're going to engage in a guided values clarification exercise, identify your top 5 personal leadership values, and then start connecting them to concrete leadership actions. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions and conversation. And this is really an interactive session. So please feel free to unmute, share, or drop your thoughts in the chat. And we definitely want to hear from you throughout the session.
Okay, so to begin, we want to start with a little reflection question. So, how do you show up as a leader? How do you show up as a leader on your best day? Drop one word in the chat that describes how you show up on that day. Positive attitude, intentional, consistent, focused, energetic, confident, kind, empathetic, supportive, genuine, happy, ready to work. Okay, so if you stop and think a minute, these are great action words or mindsets that align back to our values. And our values being kind of what drives us to do the work we're doing, right? And so we're going to get into a little bit more depth here in just a second. Okay, so Aubrey, did you freeze? It's all right, I'll take over. Okay, so the cost of leading. So, what happens when we lead without clarity about who we are and what we value? If we stop and think back to that reflection question we just had of how you show up on your best day, if you showed up and you were not clear about who you were or what your values were or what you're back, okay, or what you brought to the table, there would be some difficulty. You'd be working through some challenges. So when we lead reactively, responding to the loudest voice in the room, the most urgent email, the most pressing deadline, this leads to burnout. From the workload in general, but also from the constant decision fatigue or not having a clear direction. So I heard several of you say ready and focused, consistent. And so also this inconsistency of making decision, checking email, checking WebEx, sending an email, updating a syllabus, or changing a discussion board question. Just all these little decisions begin to show up in our leadership. So teams can sense something is off when they can pinpoint or a name or off, even when they can pinpoint a name for it. So people around you can sense what you're doing and saying, and what you're doing is not aligning with what you are saying. So, I'm guessing when I describe that, you can probably picture a time you were part of a team where someone would say one thing and do the opposite. Think about how you felt. We've all been in that situation. It's extremely frustrating. It's confusing. It's disheartening. You struggle to continue to follow that leader. Your trust fades. The relationship distances. So when this is going on, we can also feel the misalignment in ourselves. There's a gap between who we know we are and how we are actually showing up. And it's super uncomfortable, and not the positive uncomfortable where we're going to grow in an environment. So one thing we know to be true is our values are always present. These don't disappear, but we have to ask ourselves, are we leading from them or despite them? So today we're discussing how to lead from your values and to keep that focus strong.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that technical glitch. But the first framework we want to introduce is authentic leadership. And at its core, authentic leadership is about leading from the inside out. Think about what that means for you. So when we talk about authentic leadership, we start with self-awareness and truly knowing your values, your emotions, your strengths. That's the foundation for everything else. You cannot lead authentically from a place that you've never taken the time to consider. So from that self-awareness grows what we call an internalized moral perspective. And this is the idea that your leadership is guided by your own internal standards and not all the external pressure, the institutional expectations, what may feel politically convenient in the moment. Like, this is what I need to do for this XYZ. And I know that at some point we've all experienced that pressure of that external pressure. So when you lead from that internal place, your leadership becomes consistent and trustworthy. You are just you're consistent throughout all of those decisions. So, authentic leadership is also relational. When you show up transparently in your relationships and share your thinking and invite honest dialogue, that only enhances your credibility. Think about when people are like that with you. You that's a valuable experience. You engage in those relationships much more meaningfully. It signals to your team that you're trustworthy and that open communication is welcome. Like that you are ready to have that dialogue. And all of that, all of those things that I just mentioned requires balanced processing. The ability to consider those different perspectives that are going to come throughout your organization. The information is considered thoughtfully before making decisions. Even when you've got those high stakes situations, the pressure's on, and they're looking at you to make a decision, you're taking that time to do a self check, consider those different perspectives, balance all of that processing to move and to lead authentically. So what connects all of these ideas is simple. Your values are your compass. When you know them clearly, every decision has a true north. And that is so imperative as a leader.
Okay, so we, with the help of AI, created this wonderful little graph here, kind of walking you through the whole self-authorship theory, where the development happens across dimensions, and it shows a reflection of the shift from external dependence to internal definition. So if we look at the cognitive piece here, understanding how we acquire knowledge is essential. Leaders must cultivate cognitive awareness to evaluate their thought processes and decisions effectively. This enhances leadership outcomes and team dynamics. And you can see here from our external formulas to our crossroads leading into that self-authorship piece, where we're using evidence to decide and knowing knowledge is contextual. So the interpersonal, excuse me, here is where healthy interpersonal relationships are key to effective leadership. Fostering relational dynamics encourages transparency and collaboration, ensuring that a leader's values resonate with their team and also the organizational culture, and that these values align with the outcomes of that organizational culture. And again, you see your external formulas, your crossroads, and then that self-authorship piece really being where you have authentic relationships. You value yourself and you value others. More willing to listen to different opinions, more willing to step outside of our comfort zone and maybe take advice from a colleague or a peer. And then we have this intrapersonal, where a self-authorship emphasizes the importance of an internally guided compass, allowing leaders to make decisions that align with their core values and beliefs, and fostering authenticity and confidence. And here, moving from those external formulas to that crossroads to that self-authorship piece, where you have your internal belief system and your identity guides your decisions. Identity being what makes up who you are, and those values are an influence of that piece. So connecting to our roots, our theme here of resilience, outreach, ownership, sustainability, and trust. So resilience enables leaders to withstand challenges while maintaining focus on their values. Outreach or ownership. Ownership empowers leaders to act intentionally, aligning their actions with their core beliefs. Outreach encourages leaders to model values-driven behavior, inspiring others to follow suit. Trust builds strong relationships, allowing teams to thrive when consistency is prioritized. And sustainability ensures leaders maintain energy and passion while honoring their foundational values.
Okay, so now we're going to move into our values exercise. And you may have done some version of this previously, and it's a simple exercise, but it isn't easy to pinpoint our values. Like, what does that mean to me? Like, does that word mean exactly what I think it means versus what, you know, XYZ or Susie Cream Cheese thinks it means? So I'm going to share a list of 40 values in the chat. You can absolutely pick something off this list, but this is just kind of get your mind working here. Pick your top 10, and these are the values that feel most like you. Okay? So I'm gonna put those in the chat real quick. But obviously, if there's something that's not on this list, it's up for grabs. So take just a few minutes to figure out what is your top 10. Okay, so was that an easy process? Did that come very easily to you, or were there a few that you kind of struggled with? Does anybody care to, you can throw it in the chat, you can unmute,
I'd like to say that they're all me. So, it's like
right?
hard to narrow it down.
Yes, it is. It's hard to narrow because it's not saying that any of those are not important. It's just what shows up time and time again in your daily decision making or your actions and things like that. All of those have value. Um, but it is hard to say these are the top ones that I prioritize this one over this one. But I'm going to challenge you again to now narrow it down to your top five. And we're not going to narrow it down after this. This is your final five. And I want you to choose your five most essential leadership values and not necessarily the ones you think you should have or aspirational or anything. These are the ones that you actually lead from or the ones that you're like, this is important to me, but I need to be more intentional about leading from it. And then I'm going to throw out one more thing. If you find yourself struggling to narrow it down between one or two or maybe a few, ask yourself which one, if I violated it, would feel like a betrayal of who I am. If I had to make a decision that went against this, I would really struggle with that. Okay, we'll come back together in just a minute. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving through the session, but I do want to challenge you that as you're thinking through these, you may have some notes next to each of your top five of like, what does that mean to you? Because the same word can mean very different things to different people. So, for instance, when I talk to my kids and I say maybe, I'm like, I don't know that I'm really gonna do it. My kids are like, that's locked in. So, or in a few minutes, or I'll think about it. Like whatever, people have these different definitions for words, and it's the same thing with values. So, like, jot some notes. Like, what does that word mean to you in relation to your work and how you use it? And there's no right answer with that. It's just being very honest about what that means for you. So now that you have your five values identified, I want to encourage you to share. If you can drop one of them in the chat, let's see the different values that really resonated with the group. I'm seeing spirituality, caring, genuineness, dependable, equity, justice, courage, honesty, integrity. Ooh, integrity's up there twice. Passion, dependable, growth, caring, health. Okay, so think about what this looks like from a daily basis when you approach leadership from this. Like, how does that show up for you? And you may even think about, like, what does this look like in terms of your teams? I'm seeing some more come through here: purpose, faith, integrity, service, commitment, achievement, spirituality. These are all great words. So think about what does that look like in your daily work, but then also think about all the people you work with and what does that look like in their work and how they contribute. So we may not have the same top five, but they can complement each other. I almost look like it as like a jigsaw puzzle of how we all come together from different perspectives and approaches and things like that, and how that only improves the work and helps us work better as a team. So, if there's anybody who would be willing to unmute, would you share one of your top five values and like what it means to you as a leader? Like what are some of these things that how does that show up in your work? Do we have any brave souls who will unmute?
I said courage. Andrea Moore said Harding. I said courage. And for me, courage shows up through my willingness to take risks. Risks as a leader, risk is a very important attribute of leadership in my mind. And for me, It is courage to get things wrong. It's courage to say, I don't have the answer. It's courage to say, that's a great idea and didn't come from me. It's courage to step into spaces that I may not even have been welcomed into, honestly, but recognize the value of stepping in, being there. It's courage to be silent and listen. So that's how it shows up for me.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anyone else who'd like to share?
I'll share that I provided integrity, or I listed integrity as my top
Mm-hmm.
one. And I think I just keep thinking about that phrase, maybe y'all have heard it, of if you don't stand for something, you're fall for anything. And so you have to be principled, whether that is, institutional policies or your own moral compass, but you have to have some integrity about you as a leader.
For sure. Absolutely. Especially when you're making those decisions, because you're not going to make everybody happy.
Right, right. Very rarely.
Very good. One last offer if there's anybody else who wants to share on the floor.
I can
Oh,
share.
for sure.
Purpose was one of mine, and that sticks out for me because we have to, for me anyway, I have to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Even if I don't agree with what the goal is, I at least need to know what it is. And so, especially when we're asking people to do difficult things, um, one of the questions that comes up and that makes sense to me is, now tell me why again, how is this going to get us to our goal? And as a leader, I should have an answer for that question. I should know, I should have some idea. And if I don't, that is problematic. So I find that having the purpose be clear and shared, helps, especially when we all have to make tough decisions and we have to do hard things if the
Yes,
why and the purpose is clear.
for sure. That does make a difference in how you communicate with your team. And yeah, you're not going to like every decision, you know, and how you help your team get through those decisions and carrying out those things. And I think like Dr. Morris was talking about having courage to be in that room. Even though, this may not be going your way. How are you going to show up and do your best work? I think that's all so important. And when your values show up in your daily life, that's when your leadership becomes transformative. And that's really a key part of our session today.
Okay, but sometimes our values and actions misalign, right? Sometimes we get kind of stuck in the trenches and we're overwhelmed, and we kind of need that stop, pause, reflect, restart. Because when our values and our actions misalign, it creates inner tension and dissatisfaction. We may become more negative. We may become frustrated, less patience, less maybe avoider, less productive. A lot of times, decision discomfort could occur. A misalignment often leads to uncomfortable decisions that we cannot fully support. This creates a sense of unease and doubt in our leadership approach and direction. It can also erode trust. Team members sense inconsistencies even when they can't articulate them, leading to a gradual erosion in trust and leadership and a decline in team morale and cohesion. So sometimes that recalibration is needed. This misalignment signals the necessity for recalibration, prompting leaders to reassess their values and actions to ensure they're aligning with their core beliefs and their leadership identity. And we have this graph here where this individual's values may be authenticity, connection, growth. But sometimes we are not aligning our values with our actions. So for instance, authenticity doesn't mean we have to people please and say yes to every single thing we're asked to do. We have to make sure that we're saying yes to the things that feed our soul, the things that we have a burning passion about, not just something that someone knows we can do well and it can be eliminated from their plate. Connection does not mean always available. And then that overcommitting and not setting boundaries can lead to burnout, can lead to not being our best self. Growth, value of learning and personal development doesn't mean that we avoid risks and stick to what's comfortable. We still have to take risks. We have to put ourselves in that good uncomfortable zone where we are learning. I always say we don't grow, and I tell my kids this: you're not going to grow until you're a little bit uncomfortable. And so alignment isn't about perfection, but it's about intention. And so small intentional actions that align with your values can create clarity, peace, and fulfillment. And we want to avoid that stress, burnout, regret, in a sense of being off track that misalignment tends to create. So we have strategies here to kind of help ensure that we create a peaceful harmony between our actions and who we are as a leader and our values. So use your values as a decision filter. So when faced with a challenging choice, pause to reflect on your core values. This moment of introspection allows you to evaluate each option through the lens of what truly matters to you. Consistency in choices. We want to clarify our values yet again. We want to understand the decision. We want to apply our values filter, make the aligned choice, and review and reflect. So ensuring your decisions align with your value fosters trust within your team. It demonstrates integrity and commitment of your leadership principles. You are becoming that leader by example. You're fulfilling your values through your actions, not just your words. So you're creating a more cohesive and motivated environment. So this 5-step framework here is a great kind of checks and balances to ensure that we're using our values as a decision filter. So when your values lead, your decisions feel clearer, your confidence grows, and your leadership becomes authentic.
Okay. The second strategy is about transparency. And sometimes people are really hesitant to share their values. Like, is this really what I need to be putting out there? But naming your values with your team or your department office is not oversharing. It's intentional leadership. When you share what you value with your team and explain why those values matter to you, people start to understand how you lead. You model ownership. You demonstrate that you're accountable to something beyond the task list. These are all the things we've got to get done, and I'm going to follow up and make sure you get it done. You invite others into your leadership in a way that builds trust. They start to understand how you approach things. Okay, this is what's important, and they feel like they can contribute to that. And when values are named and shared, people can start to build on it together. You move from I lead by these values to we lead by shared values. And that makes a huge difference in team dynamics. And people feel like they can contribute. They understand the decision-making process. Things are not arbitrary. They understand the methodology. So one thing you can do this week is share your top 5 leadership values with your team or with a colleague you trust and tell them what each means to you. So I told you to jot some notes down. Tell them why it matters. Then observe how the conversation unfolds. These are really interesting conversations because then people feel like, oh, I have some commonality with that. Oh, I understand how you're doing that. Or maybe they have a different value that they're approaching it with, but they're able to see how that could link together, like I talked about that jigsaw puzzle earlier. And then as this framework on the slide shows, this is a process, okay? Start the conversation, brainstorm together, identify those shared values, and define what they look like in action. Like I said, people approach things very differently. So what means one thing to one person means something different to another. So discuss what that looks like. Have a shared operational language with that. And then revisit and reinforce. These are going to come back together, especially when you're making those team decisions. Is this important to the team? Is this how we're approaching this problem? And these shared values create that stronger alignment, that deeper trust, and better decisions as a team. So when people feel that connection, people start to do their best or can do their best work. They're contributing in that manner. And then we're going to move on to strategy 3. And this is building in regular reflection. And I feel like we talk about reflection a lot. This is in terms of a higher education piece. It's the most sustainable, but probably the most tempting to skip when we're busy. I see that Susan raised her hand. Did you mean to do that? Perfect. Come on.
Okay, so back on strategy two, when you were
Oh, yeah.
talking about
Mhm.
the whole sharing with your team, what if it's not very well received? Like if you go to your team and you're like, these are the things that are really important to me, and they're like, okay. I mean, like, how do I then navigate through that? Because I mean, I work in different teams, but there's like a team in particular that I feel like would just look at me.
That's a great question. Do you approach it like, so do you walk, I'm saying like, oh, if you just walk in the room and that these are my top values and this is how I'm going to approach it. If you're able to say, hey, can we talk about like, how are you making that decision? Or this is what's coming up on the agenda or the task list, whatever's on the docket. How are you approaching that? Like, is there a way that you're coming across that? Okay. And hearing them, hearing first to understand, then to be understood. So how can you hear how they're approaching that? And is there commonality? Are there differences in how you're defining that value? So that operational language. Oh, because a lot of times when I've had those conversations, oh, I didn't see it that way. And it's not like I'm trying to challenge you or anything like that, but oh, okay, that's a different perspective. Maybe that's something I'm not considering. Or hey, could we talk about this? Is this something, is there a perspective that maybe you could encourage them to consider? And coming at it from a, can you help me understand before it's, well, this is just, it's not going to work or however it is. And if and I will say, there are some people that they're not open and that's their choice. You have no control over that. But are you able to have the conversation in a way that invites them to share their thinking, their perspective? And from my experience, when people are invited to share, you can start to ascertain like, oh, this is how they're coming about it, and I can get a little inkling as to a way to work with them versus just throw my hands up. And it's not a perfect solution every time, and it's going to be a different outcome depending on that person's approach or leadership perspective, things like that. But when I've had some difficult teams, it's been helpful for me to come at it as a just help me understand and then try to find some commonality in there because ultimately since we're all in higher education, we're typically all working towards a similar goal in the overall arching student success, institutional success, those kinds of things. Is that helpful? Okay, thank you. So that was a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, 'cause not everybody's open and receptive to those things. And that's okay. We can help them. We'll all get there. So the third strategy is building in this regular reflection. Like I said, sometimes this is really easy to skip because we've got all these things to do, and I'm not gonna sit there. Maybe I'll think about it on my drive home. But sustainable leadership requires pausing and asking yourself, am I still leading from my values? Where have I drifted away from this? Because sometimes we do have that uncomfortable feeling of like, oh, this isn't really working. Or where do I need to adjust? And having those checkpoints with those. So this slide shows a 5-step process for that, right? First, scheduling it. If it's not on my calendar, it's really easy for me to forget about it or let it slip off the list. So like protecting that time like I would an important meeting. And it could really be like whatever cadence works for you. But consider your intentions, your values in relation to your actions over the last week, the last month, or whatever scheduling works for you. But thinking about, was there alignment or were there times that there was tension? You're like, I really feel like I didn't like match up with that. Like that was a hard decision because it didn't feel right in relation to XYZ value. So we're all learning through this. So learning and adjusting and like asking yourself, this felt really good. I felt proud of this, or I need to stop this, or this is one that I've kind of forgotten. I need to start putting this in there. and making one step towards that goal. So, like, we're not seeking perfection. We're all imperfect humans. We're a work in progress. And figuring out, like, what helps us do our best work. So, higher education is constantly changing and demands more from us to adapt to that change. So, we're every week, it's something different. It's a different goal, a different challenge. So, reflection is essential to that sustainability over time, right? So people who've had long careers in higher education, they've had to do those checkpoints at multiple points. So how are you building that into your schedule? And this ties directly into the S in our roots theme today, that sustainability grows from consistency. We're not going to be perfect, but how can we build that consistency so that we're coming back and we're able to be sustainable over a period of time? Oh, Dana, you're muted.
That'll help. We're going to reflect for a moment. So we want you to stop and think of a recent leadership decision. Which of your top values was guiding you? And were there any missing? You can share in the chat or you can unmute and go ahead and voice. And we're hoping this just helps create a time for reflection and creating some self-awareness. No right or wrong answer. We just know we are a bunch of imperfect humans trying to do our best. So sometimes if we stop and think about our work, I always think there's room for improvement in my work. Responsibility, accountability. And are these your guiding or is this something that's lacking? Guided by responsibility. Very good.
Yeah, for me, Dana,
Yeah.
the accountability was for what the task was
Mhm.
and taking ownership of the part that I did not successfully navigate for
Thank
my
you.
team. So,
Right. Right. Okay, Andrea had a really good one. I think I lacked hope in a recent decision, and I want that at the top of the list. I can relate. We have a lot of structural changes that required leadership recently, and I feel like I held one of my values, resilience, over another, authenticity. Good example, Abby.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I feel like there was not much hope, and that is what I'm trying to bring.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Susan.
I'll also say I did this exercise as part of a group a number of years ago. And there was a really interesting discussion as to when you say top five, sometimes people see that as a hierarchy. This is my number one, number two, number three, and in that order. And for me, it's linear. And that's been helpful for me to keep that in mind as things because there's certain times that one will take precedence over the other, or it just shows up more in how that decision needs to be made or action needs to be carried out. So it's also like, and me personally, I don't visualize it as a hierarchy. I look at it as linear, and that's been really helpful as I've tried to work through my values as a leader.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Okay, we will move on.
Okay. So we're going to close out our session today, and I want to leave you with this. Okay, you already have leadership roots in your values. You identify them today, and these values aren't new. These aren't things. These are things that have been with you for years. They've been shaping your leadership, your relationships, your communication long before we came together today. But today was just an exercise in clarity and intention. And for some of you, it may have been a chance to reaffirm those values. So after today's session, I want to challenge you to do two things. This week, write down your top 5 values somewhere where you're going to see them. It could be on your computer screen, it could be in your planner, a sticky note, whatever makes sense for you that it's visual. Because I'm a very visual person. If it's not in front of my face, I tend to, okay, that's something I did. But if it's in front of my face, I can see it every day and think about like, what does that look like? And then for each value, identify one way you're going to honor it in your leadership. Think about a decision coming up, a conversation you need to have, or maybe it's something, a practice you need to implement in your routine. But pinpoint that, like what's that going to look like over the next few weeks? And this keeps them top of mind, so it becomes regular practice to consider these values in your leadership. And it's not like, oh yeah, I did that one day. This having that visibility keeps it at the forefront of your work, and you're able to see that every day of checking in. And when you're making that decision, you're thinking, yep, I need to consider that. So we want to thank you so much for your time. Values is such a great way to, because there's so many different ways to lead, but thinking about your values and considering other people's values and how that contributes to the team, I think it makes it more of a group effort and people feel included and you can invite them in. And again, finding that commonality, I think that makes a world of difference in taking your leadership into that transformative realm.
And have,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I was just going to say, in having that framework of self-authorship at the root of your leadership as well, knowing, this is my book. I'm the author of this book. I'm capable and I have the opportunity to write it. So I can lead in that way. I can be that example in that way. And I can drive the work I do based on who I am and who I want my life, what I want my life to look like.
For sure. For sure. So if anything today resonated with you, we do work with higher education organizations and teams and things like that. We'd welcome the opportunity to chat with you offline. We do leadership development workshops, professional development programming, strategic planning, those kinds of things. But we also want to open it up to questions. What did you gain from this? Is there anything that you'll take away and implement into your personal leadership as you move forward?
I just scheduled my value reflection time for next week
I love
because
that.
it needs to be on my calendar or it's not going to happen. So,
That's
Right.
how I am.
Proud
If
of
it's
you,
not on my
Nancy.
calendar, I'll forget it. For sure. Thank you for sharing that.
I agree with that. If recognizing, honoring, owning that time with ourselves is of most importance. Uh, it's the statement of you can't give what you don't have is certainly true. Well, my statement is you can't be what you don't practice. And so practicing that is important, worthy, valuable, critical, and it can really make a difference. So that reminder is always good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm seeing in the chat, Joanne made should be a value list for myself and added courage. I like that. And closely observing my leadership values going forward from Bindu. And rest is a strategic priority. I think that's so important. Thank you
Yeah.
for calling that out. Because a lot
Yeah.
of times we do get into that, oh, we've got to hustle, we've got to do all these things, and all, people are asking us to do things because you're doing great work. And so then people come find you and they want you to do more. But that rest is a priority. And then
Absolutely.
Abby, I'm so glad identifying values was part of the session because I really had a hard time knowing what my top values were until today. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. My sticky note is on top of my computer with my top 5 now. Like I said, all of those values are important and show up in our work. That's not saying that they're not important to us, but there's some that just stick out to us. And having that time to pinpoint those can be really useful as you move forward in your leadership. Are there any other questions or thoughts that you want to share? Before we close out, I want to be respectful of our time. Andrea's planned a great schedule for us today. So
Well, thank you so much for having us,
thank you.
Andrea, and thank you all for joining today. We always enjoy sharing in this capacity and hearing your thoughts and comments and suggestions, and we look forward to the rest of this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nicely done. This is a great time to stand up and stretch if you need to. I'm going to pull up our little wheel and we'll do another. Hopefully, we'll spin this bad boy again and get another winner while you're stretching. Is Gwinnett here today? I didn't see that name in the join, so I'm going to spin it again.
Wait, Gwynette's here. I see her in the
Oh,
chat.
Gwinnett's here and Kendra. Do we also have Kendra here? Okay. Gwinnett, I'm so sorry. I missed you. Okay, so the middle little portion of our time together today, we're going to do a little bit of, I don't know, housekeeping, we'll call it. I have a couple of things to share, and Susan's going to share something, and then I'll jump into my presentation. So the first thing is, I don't know if you remember this, but when you signed up to come today, you were asked for some possible professional development topics for next year. And these are some of the fantastic ideas that were suggested on that form. So I was thinking this would be a good time to put these ideas in front of you. And if there is something that really resonates with you, either that you would love to share with us about or you want more information on, would you email me and let me know how you would like to participate next year? I think that would be really great because these are fantastic ideas. All of them are amazing. So we can just kind of pull from that. And also, if you have another idea, would you please email me and let me know what that is so that we can start planning for our fall 26 professional development? Those are pretty good. Okay, and also I was asked to share our May Hustle Roundtable event. You can sign up for that using the QR code. Dr. Clark is amazing. I'm very excited that we're going to get to hear from her in May. And also, I was asked, who do we recommend for more of those roundtable speaker events? If you've got an idea or if you might be interested in speaking at one of those, that QR code right there will take you to the form. There are a couple of names mentioned on the sign up form for today, so I've put those on here. If you have another idea, I know that our people who are in charge of that would be very grateful to have that information. Okay, Susan, you're on.
I never know, it's a small state, but I just never know who knows anybody. But there are 2 free camps that have been funded. The Arkansas Gifted and Talented Camp was funded by AGES, which is the Arkansas Gifted and Talented. It's going to be June 8th through the 12th. It's called CAKE because I have an acronym issues. So it's Creativity, Agricultural, and Knowledge of Enterprise. But on Thursday, they're actually going to be doing a cake with their business pitch. This is Rising 11th and 12th grade. It's free. It's just a day camp, but I never know who has nieces, nephews, other people. And then the second one is University of Arkansas Mobile Human Science Summer Camp, also free. And they get a t-shirt because it's U of A, right? This is funded by a $150,000 USDA grant, and they're going to be doing apparel, hospitality and tourism, and then nutrition. And just to give you a little bit, the one at U of A, the reason why we're having it here at Arkansas Tech is because it's my daughter. And she grew up on this campus at 15 years old, watching me do girls' culinary camp. She went out and got a women's giving circle camp to purchase sewing machines to be able to bring into rural areas. You know, you don't have to buy everything brand new and just basic sewing type things. So both of them are just day camps. They are free, but if you or anyone else you know, scan the QR code, and lunch is included. I'm trying to find a sponsor for some shirts, but you know, it's going to be June and nobody's got money in academia. But I wanted to share that with y'all if you knew anyone at all interested, because we've talked to people who are like, oh, I have a niece there or whatever. So thank you for letting me share that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Does anybody else have something that you'd like to share out before we do our second session and then wrap up? Okie doke. Then I will get started. My topic today is cultivating roots, and we're going to talk about workplace coaching as a way to do that in our environment. I'm going to start with a metaphor that you've probably heard of, the dance floor balcony metaphor. Are you familiar with this? You're either on the dance floor, and on the dance floor, you're in the middle of the action and you can only see, what's right in front of you, or you're on the balcony and you're looking down, and so you have a different perspective of what is going on. That metaphor is about 25 years old. It was first introduced in a pretty good book called Leadership on the Line. If you want a good summer read, Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky wrote that book, and they provided that metaphor. It's really good. It's a good metaphor. I am going to start with the metaphor, and then we're going to go from there. So, where are you right now in the middle of things? If you're on the dance floor, it depends on where you're standing, what you see. I mean, if you're at the back of the room, you're only seeing a certain portion, and if you're in the middle of the action, you're only seeing that. So where are you on the dance floor, and maybe what are you not seeing because of where you're standing? Our organizational chart position often kind of dictates what we can see on a day-to-day basis. So if you're on the dance floor, maybe it's time to start moving up to the balcony, where you can step back and observe and gain some perspectives, maybe see some patterns that you wouldn't have seen because you were in the middle of things. I like this idea that my colleague Alan Howell provided, which is a third element to that metaphor. And he has suggested that we also need to spend time in the stairwell. So not only are we on the dance floor where everything is happening and it's crazy all the time, and not only do we need to spend some time up on the balcony, but there's a lot of time where we are going up and down from one to the other, and we are in that stairwell. And Alan has suggested that leaders need to be intentional about the time that they spend in the stairwell and to use it wisely, so that you're thinking about what you need to do when you get back on the dance floor, or what you need to be looking for when you get up on the balcony. And I really like this stairwell idea. And I also love it because stairwell conversations are what I would call coaching conversations, which is where we're going to kind of start today. So coaching for the workplace, it applies whether you're on the dance floor, or you are up on the balcony, or you're in the stairwell. It doesn't matter where you are in your journey. Coaching comes together and it offers you a better perspective regardless of what you're looking at. So that's our starting place for today. And I always start with this because I know some people aren't familiar with workplace coaching. If you have this mental image in your head when you hear coaching, hopefully by the time we're done today, you won't have this image anymore, because that's not what I'm talking about. Workplace coaching is not yelling from the sidelines. It's not telling people how to improve. It's not advising. It's not offering your advice. It's not fixing. It's something different altogether. And it's kind of magical, actually. But it's this wonderful thought partnership that you have with your coach that is thought-provoking. In many ways, it's intimate because you get to know your coach or your client so well that you become basically a second brain for one another, which is what my colleague Rigel says about his coach. Coaching offers you a safe space to get whatever is going on in your head out of your head and out through your body so you can actually do something with it. When I talk about coaching for me, what it does for me as a client is it helps me get myself out of the boxes that I put myself into. Like, I restrict myself in my own brain and I think I can't do something, but coaching helps me get out of the boxes that I put myself into. So these are the goals for the rest of our time together today. I'm going to kind of go through coaching. I'm going to connect coaching to what we do in higher education. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about the difference between advice giving and coaching. We're going to look at some good and bad questions. And then I'm going to wrap us up with a little bit of data from Harding University about coaching on a higher ed campus. So, first of all, coaching in higher ed. Much of the work that we do on a daily basis is invisible. It happens in offices, it happens behind closed doors, it is conversations, it's one-on-ones with students, it's policy changes, it's things that happen behind the scenes, not the things that are splashed across the media. And those invisible moments, those ones behind the scenes, are what quietly shape the culture of the universities that we belong to. And coaching, more specifically, a coaching culture, really provides a way to lead or be more effective and intentional in those types of invisible moments. And so that's where our theme of roots really gets started. Our themes focus on resilience, ownership, outreach, trust, and sustainability. They're all represented in coaching for higher education. So coaching conversations build resilience through reflection and developing internal resources. They shift the responsibility back to the individual, which helps that person take ownership of both their problems and their solutions. The relational presence of coaching, which is so beautiful, it fosters connection that works across campus, across disciplines and colleges, and across those silos that we're always talking about. The deep listening and intentionality of coaching creates psychological safety, and coaching develops people who are self-reliant and capable of making informed decisions, which reduces constant dependence on leaders. Look at the last one again, because that is really kind of what we are trying to do as educators. We are trying to develop people who are self-reliant, and that is what we're also trying to do as leaders. Coaching is a way to do this. Coaching develops roots, and the beauty of it is that we can start seeing the impact in very small conversations that happen in our offices that have very far-reaching effects. Okay, so let me give you an example. Someone comes to you they bring a problem. What is your first instinct? Someone brings you a problem. What is your first instinct? I know I'm not the only person in this gathering who says, fix it. I want to be Miss Fix It. We are kind people. We want to be helpful. We want to solve the problem. We want to help people. We're good people. And that is our natural instinct, is to help someone fix it. But here's another question. Why is it that some of the very best advice we give is rarely followed? Or let's flip that around. Why is it that when someone gives us advice, we tend to push back against it, even if it's actually a pretty good suggestion? My mother-in-law, God bless her, she gives me advice on how to lose weight, and she's been doing it for 29 years. She has the very best of intentions, and I know that on an intellectual level, but the thought of more of that advice, it makes me automatically push back. Why is that? Well, it's because giving advice is just another form of taking control. So the advice giver is trying to control the actions and the decisions of the advice receiver. And while that is often very well intentioned, advice is usually less effective than coaching. Plus, most of us just don't like when people try to tell us what to do. That is human nature. So our advice doesn't fail because our students or our colleagues don't care, or because they don't want to be successful. Our advice doesn't work because we own it. Not our advisees, not our colleagues, not our students. Even when our advice is good and right and well informed, it does not build ownership. And we have to help build ownership for people to grow. So if we want our colleagues and our team members and our students to take ownership and build resilience, we need to step away from giving advice and move towards asking better questions instead. So why is a coaching solution better than advice giving? I'm gonna do a little bit of, we'll try some role play, okay? So you are my coaching client. Lucky you, we just logged on to Zoom. I am going to ask you one of the first questions that I usually ask, which is, what has been taking space in your brain this week? What's been top of mind for you this week? If you feel safe, you can put it in the chat. You don't have to do that. You can let it bubble. Most of us probably have an issue, a concern, an opportunity. Something is bubbling up, something is emerging. I'm going to see if whatever our goal is, whatever we are working towards. So based on what you would tell me in that first couple of minutes of our coaching conversation, I would follow up with another question. And that question might be, what makes this feel important right now? And a question like that usually helps us get a little bit of perspective, takes us up on the balcony. What makes it feel important right now? When you think about this issue, what is your body telling you? Where do you feel it? Another question might be, what have you already tried? Or possibly, what's holding you back? What are some of the options that are in front of you? One of my favorites, because it sticks me in the heart every time I'm asked it, is, what would happen if you had no fear? What would you do in this moment? What would you do if time or resources were not issues? Another powerful one is, what's the cost of not doing it? What's the cost of no action? And then think about those questions for a minute. And I'm going to put them back on your screen so you can see them. So questions like this usually start a really productive coaching conversation. So if a student comes to me and they have something they want to talk about, instead of trying to fix it for them, I might engage with one of these, 2 or 3 of these questions with that student and go from there. In a coaching conversation, I'm going to follow that up with what's going to be helpful for you. By the end of this conversation, what do you need to leave with? What's going to be good to walk away with? And once we define what they need to walk away with, then we know exactly what we need to do in the rest of the conversation. So these questions are, they're not like perfect and they're not magical. They're just questions that are cornerstones, and they're good questions. But there are also some questions that are not, they're not questions because they're just advice wearing a question mark. And those are the types of questions that we ask when we already have the answer or we already know what we want our person to do. And so some examples of that might be, have you thought about fill in the blank? Don't you think? Or, well, why didn't you? These are the types of questions that usually shut down a conversation pretty quickly. They definitely lead to lack of ownership of whatever the issue or the problem is with our student or our colleague. They reduce the creativity, and often they heighten some defensiveness in the person who has come to you. So I want to talk for just a minute about some bad questions. I'm going to give you a bad question, and then we're going to talk about how we make it a better question. So our scenario is we have a colleague or a student who comes into our office and they say, I am overwhelmed. I am behind in my classes or my work. I do not think I can do this. So that's what they say when they come into our office. And this might be something that you have said before. Well, don't you think breaking it up into smaller steps would help, or something along those lines? We've all asked questions like this before. But this is a problem because you're narrowing the response to your assumption, to my assumption, which limits this person's possible answers. And that immediately shuts down exploration, reduces creativity, and it encourages surface level, sort of meaningless answers. So a better question might be, what options have you considered so far? What might make this feel manageable? What could you do in the next 2 hours? Same scenario, same approach. Here's a bad question. Why didn't you start earlier? This is a tough one because why questions they're bad questions. We try not to ask why questions as coaches. Why questions trigger defensiveness in people. They carry an implied critique, even if that's not necessarily what we meant by them. So we don't want to threaten trust. We want to avoid them shifting to justifying whatever it is they've done rather than focusing on growth. And so a better question or questions might be, what's working? And then what's not working? Looking back, what got in the way? What got in the way of starting earlier? We want to know so that we don't repeat that in the future. What would you do differently next time? Bad coaching questions aren't led by bad intentions. They're just advice wearing question marks. And to help someone take ownership of their mistakes and their opportunities, we actually serve them a lot better if we withhold our advice. So instead of carrying more as a leader, as an educator, as an employee, what if we were able to develop people who could carry their own load? Let's go back to that scenario. We've still got a student or a colleague in our office. They're still doubting themselves. So in a situation like that, maybe these are some of the typical things that we might do. We might talk about time management. We might refer them to a writing center, academic center. We might tell the colleague to do this or that. We may even sit with a student and go through missed assignments, or we may volunteer to take something off our colleague's desk to give them a little bit more space. These are kind, wonderful, thoughtful things, but they're also short-term solutions that create dependence rather than building internal capacity, which is what we're trying to do with our students and our colleagues. And rarely do those short-term solutions transfer into a solution for a later circumstance. So we've unintentionally created a cycle of dependence by being helpful, and we've done that all of our lives. But coaching shifts that initial conversation from fixing to developing. So instead of jumping straight into advice mode, try questions like this, one at a time, with plenty of silence and space in between to allow the person that you're talking to, give them plenty of time. They need time. They need some silence to think. So what feels most overwhelming right now? Let them think and name it, because naming it gives them some control over it. What's within your control this week? Again, let them think about that and name it, because it gives them power and control. Don't rush to fill the silence, which is something that I struggle with as a coach. I want to fill the silence, but when we let silence linger, we give the gift of that to the person in front of us. And we give them the gift of time to think and think through what's going on. So if we solve the problem, we help once. But if we coach the person, we help every future version of that problem. This is a helpful framework, a coaching tool that we use as coaches. I've got a little sticky note on my monitor that has TGROW on it so that I can be reminded quickly about maybe a question that I could ask. It helps walk through a conversation so that I'm helping the person in front of me identify the goal, identify whatever it is that we're going to talk about. And then it helps me sort of steer the conversation so that we can grapple with where they currently are, the landscape, the realities that are in front of them. They can consider their options. They can think through their obstacles that might get in the way. And ultimately, they can leave the conversation with some action steps, with some power to actually make productive movement on whatever it is that they're concerned about. You could actually, very literally, you could take these questions on the screen and ask them in order and have a more productive conversation with the next person who comes in your office than giving them advice would do. So again, I say if we solve the problem, we help once. If we coach the person, we help every future version of that problem. So a few years ago at Harding, we started talking about coaching culture, and we made some noise about what that might be. And then in 2024, in the fall of 2024, Harding Leadership funded a cohort of 10 faculty members from across the university to begin to take our executive and workplace coaching graduate certificate courses. So these 10 people, they took 4 classes. They sat in the student seat again, and they also coached a lot because you have to coach 100 hours to sit for the exam that they had to sit for. So we're talking about a lot of time, a lot of investment. And of course, we wanted to collect some data on that to see how useful is this and how is it affecting our campus community. So halfway through the program, which was last spring, we pulled their client list to gain some information on how the initiative was going, how it was being received by the community. This is the data from clients who responded in 25. We're collecting for the second year now. This reflects, I think, some takeaways that apply across higher education, across the state, not just for Harding University. So you can see on the screen, the largest set of our clients came from faculty and staff, which was wonderful. And we did have some graduate students who joined us, and then we had some alumni, which were also Harding community in Searcy community members. So these are the clients who signed up to receive coaching from our 10-member faculty cohort. And the age of our clients ranged from 23 to 64, which I absolutely love that we had 64-year-olds saying, yeah, I want to be better at what I do. Help me do that. I wanted to look more specifically at the client base, so those faculty and staff clients, and these are the offices and departments where those people came from. And I love the diversity that you see on the screen. We had clients signing up from almost every building and office on campus, and they were paired with someone who was not in their building or office. And that was an intentional thing that we did. So talk about knocking down some silos. That is one way to do it. I asked a few questions. We have a few questions that I'm going to share the data with. The first is, before they entered the coaching relationship, did they actually know what they were getting themselves into? 61% of them didn't at all. And then only 11.5% of them did. And we saw that number a couple of other times. 11.5% of the clients knew what they were getting into. And I think that their relationships were probably a little richer because they met more often with their coaches. Another question we asked was, did you have any initial resistance or hesitance to begin the coaching experience? And I love the fact that 65% of people were just curious, which is something that we really love in coaching. We want our coaches and our clients to be curious people. You see the 11.5%. Again, they weren't hesitant because they already knew what they were getting themselves into. Next, this is because I had a theory based on absolutely nothing. But I had a theory that it would take 4 sessions for our clients to gain trust with their coach. And my theory was blown out of the water because almost 70% said that they started trusting their coach in their first session. And only 3.5% at the time of survey said they did not trust their coach at all, which is a pretty decent number. Here's where my theory actually sort of made sense. In what session did you start to see benefits of coaching? The 4th session. By the 4th session, 96% of our clients were seeing benefits in their personal or professional life, which is pretty cool. And then, as the director of our coaching program, let me just say the next 2 slides are like icing on my birthday cake. All of our clients, 100% of our clients, saw value in their coaching relationships, and 100% of our clients reported that they see potential in coaching as means for improving our culture at Harding. 100%. So That doesn't happen very often. 100% of our respondents believed coaching could improve the culture of the university. When we started our session, we opened up with the dance floor and the balcony and the stairwell metaphor. We kind of considered where we might be. Regardless of where you are today in this moment right now, if you're on the dance floor dancing away and just trying to survive the day, or if you're up on the balcony making some plans for next year, wherever you are, whatever issues are in front of you, I truly believe that coaching is a wonderful tool to put in your toolkit. And I truly believe that it is a way to develop some really incredible roots. So in the fall of 26, we'll have a new cohort of coaching students who start our program. Our coaching students are graduate students. They are not 18-year-olds. And each of them will ultimately be required to gain 100 hours of coaching experience before they can sit for the exam. They're always looking for clients. So if you're interested in receiving a couple of free coaching sessions in the fall, if that's something that you might be interested in, you can email me. You see my email at the bottom, and I'll put you on my list and I'll introduce you to a coach in the fall. And also, if you're interested in learning more about becoming a coach, I'm also happy to answer questions about that. I'm going to put my teacher hat on for just a second. If I had no idea what coaching was before I showed up today for this webinar, and I was kind of curious after hearing what I've talked about, these are the two books that I would rush out and buy immediately, because these are the two books that I reach for the most often. Marsha Reynolds' Coach the Person, Not the Problem was a game changer for me when I was learning to coach. And then this Coaching Questions is sort of like a workbook. It's probably only 80 pages long, and it's 80 pages of coaching questions. It's wonderful. You can just like pick it up and find 1,000 questions that you could potentially ask that are all amazing. And now I'm going to switch and I'm going to put my coaching hat back on. And this is how I end all of my coaching sessions. I ask, what did you learn in our time together today? So that's where we are. I would love to know, what did you learn in our time together today?
Andrea, I'll share. I've heard the balcony and dance floor metaphor multiple times, but I love that stairwell edition. I think that is such a great way to talk about that. Like, how are you processing through those things? That's awesome. I'm
Yes.
really going to take that away. Thank you.
Good. Alan Howell came up with that. He's he's on our blog because he wrote it for my blog, and I was like, this is genius. He also teaches one of our classes, and he's incorporated that into one of our leadership classes, which is amazing because now our students are getting that language too. I love that. Anybody else? Anything you'd like to share?
Well done, colleague and friend. Well done.
Andrea Morris was one of those
Yes, it was
coaching faculty. Yes.
valuable, challenging, informing values absolutely shows up in this as well. As a matter of fact, it is one of the important elements that we must address for our own selves is coming to terms with who we are, where we are, how we are, and then how it shows up in our own coaching. So well done, Doc. Thank you for
You know what? So I did not know specifically like what angle Aubrey and Dana were going to take this morning or this afternoon. And when they started with authentic leadership, the authentic leadership style, I got super excited because it transfers so well into adaptive leadership, which is what all of this really kind of stems from. We are authentic and we adapt. And when we can do both of those, we are incredible leaders and we become very good coaches. So I love the pairing, like the accidental wonderful pairing of those two leadership styles today.
Today was really good. I needed to hear all of this, and also Andrea, just a good job on that and on coaching and just not giving advice, but just asking those questions that help us think it through, because we can do it with the right questioning and the right guidance, and just really good. And she's really good at that.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I love ending things early, so I will go ahead and share my screen one more time. We'll do one more drawing. Let's see who's the lucky person today. Bindu, are you still with us? Yay, congratulations. Wonderful. Excellent. Okay. Well, the only thing I have left to say is thank you so much for joining us today. I think that people who choose to spend time on their personal professional development are incredibly wonderful people. So kudos to you for being here. Thank you for joining us, and best of luck as you wrap up your semester. Thank you. Bye.